When a man hurts a good woman, something far more significant than a personal relationship falls apart, something foundational. He disrupts a moral order, a kind of unspoken contract rooted in trust, care, and mutual respect. A good woman, in this sense, is someone who chooses to invest deeply, emotionally, spiritually, and often sacrificially. She offers loyalty, patience, and love in ways that are not easily quantified, but are absolutely essential. When that offering is met with betrayal, indifference, or cruelty, the man doesn't just damage her, he introduces chaos into a structure that was holding meaning together. The consequences of that disruption are not only personal, but existential. The first and often unnoticed casualty in this act is the man's own integrity. To wound someone who has done you no harm, who in fact has done you good, is to violate the very essence of responsibility. Even if he rationalizes the action or buries it under pride or distraction, the psyche does not lie. A quiet shame begins to grow. He may sense it in moments of solitude, in the hollow victories that follow, in the erosion of his own self-respect. Every man has an internal compass, and when he ignores it, the result is internal dissonance that compounds over time. What dies in this process is not just a relationship, but a part of his moral self. Meanwhile, the woman suffers, no doubt. Good women are not immune to heartbreak. In fact, they often feel it more deeply. But with suffering comes a certain clarity. She examines, grieves, and eventually learns. And when she rises, she does so stronger, sharper, more discerning. Her innocence may dim, but her wisdom grows brighter. She becomes less open, more cautious, but not out of pettiness, rather out of necessity. Her standards rise, and those who come after must prove themselves more diligently, because now she knows the cost of misplaced trust. Ironically, the man often discovers too late what he truly lost. A good woman is not easily replaced, not because of scarcity, but because of depth. Her loyalty, once withdrawn, cannot be bought back with apologies or nostalgia. He may find himself surrounded by noise, flattery, or temporary comforts, but he will struggle to find the grounding presence he once took for granted. The absence speaks, the silence condemns, and in that quiet he confronts the long shadow of his own failures. He may wonder why things fall apart around him, but deep down he knows the source. In the end, the man stands before a choice, transformation or repetition. He can face what he's done, wrestle with it, and emerge better, or he can continue to run, blaming others, repeating the same patterns with different people. But make no mistake, every wound he causes to a good woman sets a moral and psychological debt in motion, one that will be paid, either through growth or consequence. The truth is, when a man hurts a good woman, he does not walk away unscathed. He walks away with something broken inside him, whether he knows it yet or not. When a man hurts a good woman, the damage often begins with something that seems invisible at first, a fracture in his own integrity. This isn't the kind of wound that bleeds or shows itself in an obvious way. Instead, it quietly erodes the foundation of who he is, or who he was trying to be. A man cannot inflict pain on someone who has loved him purely and walk away the same. There is a cost, and it is internal. He may carry on with his life, speak the same words, play the same roles, but something essential has been compromised. His sense of self-respect takes a hit, and with it, his ability to trust his own judgment. That crack in integrity grows over time. He may attempt to bury the guilt under distraction or deny the wrongdoing altogether, but the psyche keeps score. When a man acts in contradiction to his values, especially the deeply human ones like loyalty, honesty, and protection. It creates dissonance. He knows, even if only faintly, that he has violated something sacred, and that knowledge does not sit quietly. It resurfaces in his relationships, in his inability to fully connect, or in the recurring sense that he has lost something he can't quite name. The truth is, a man's strength isn't just in how he acts when others are watching. It's in how he treats those who are vulnerable to him, and a good woman's heart is a place of great vulnerability. When he wounds that kind of trust, he sets in motion a series of internal and external consequences. Other people may not see it immediately, but over time they feel it. His relationships begin to carry a tension, a guardedness. He becomes more distant or more performative. It's as if a part of him is always looking over his shoulder, trying to escape something that lives inside. The integrity he compromised doesn't just vanish, it echoes. In the long run, he finds it harder to form real bonds because part of him knows he has already failed where it mattered most. And unless he confronts it, he risks repeating the pattern, growing increasingly detached from the man he once hoped to be. For the woman he hurt, the pain is undeniable, but it does not leave her powerless. A good woman, when betrayed, grieves deeply, but she also learns. She reevaluates what she gives and to whom. The growth she experiences often makes her stronger, more discerning, and more self-contained. But the man's growth is not guaranteed. His healing depends on whether he is willing to face the truth, that his actions cost more than her love. They cost him part of his identity, part of his soul. Without that reckoning, the loss of integrity becomes permanent. He may look intact on the outside, but inside, he becomes a fragmented version of who he once were. Ultimately, this internal decline will manifest in his life. He may encounter repeated failures in love, struggles with meaning, or a chronic sense of restlessness. And until he is willing to trace that back to the moment he chose to hurt someone who did not deserve it, he will remain trapped in a cycle of avoidance and self-sabotage. A man who hurts a good woman does not simply walk away. He carries the wound within. And unless he chooses responsibility over denial, reflection over pride, and repentance over ego, that wound will define him far more than he ever intended. When a good woman is hurt by a man she trusted, the pain cuts deeply. It is not only the betrayal that wounds her, but the shattering of something she built with care, something she believed in. She often enters the relationship with open hands and an open heart, offering loyalty, compassion, and belief in his potential. When that offering is met with betrayal, neglect, or cruelty, it creates a rupture that is not just emotional, but existential. She may question not only him, but herself, her judgment, her worth, her ability to trust. This questioning phase is painful and disorienting, often leaving her feeling lost or diminished. In the beginning, she suffers in silence more than anyone can see. She replays conversations, second, guesses decisions, and wonders if she could have done more or loved better. There is a grieving process, even if no one has died. She grieves the version of the man she thought she knew, the future she imagined, and the emotional safety she believed she had. This grief is private, but it's profound. It touches the deepest parts of her identity because she didn't give casually. She gave from a place of sincerity, which makes the loss that much heavier. Yet slowly, something starts to shift. The same depth of emotion that allowed her to love deeply also gives her the ability to confront her pain with honesty. She doesn't numb it forever. Eventually, she sits with it, studies it, and starts to learn from it. She recognizes patterns, recalls the red flags she once ignored, and sees the ways she gave at her own expense. And as painful as that awakening is, it is the beginning of a powerful transformation. The suffering doesn't destroy her, it instructs her. It teaches her what she deserves, what she should no longer tolerate, and how to protect her heart without closing it entirely. As she grows through the pain, she becomes more grounded. Her boundaries become firmer, her voice steadier, and her sense of self stronger. The openness that was once unconditional becomes more discerning. She doesn't harden into bitterness, but she no longer places her value in being needed or fixing others. She understands now that being good doesn't mean accepting harm, and that love without respect is a wound waiting to happen. Through this process, she emerges wiser, clearer, and more aligned with her own worth. She may love again, but not in the same way. This time, her love will come from fullness, not from a desire to be validated. In time, the man who hurt her may realize what he lost, but by then, she is no longer in the place he left her. She has moved forward, not to prove a point, but because healing demanded it. The good woman he once knew still exists, but she is no longer available in the way she was. What she went through taught her how to rise from devastation without becoming cold, and how to remain kind without becoming naive. The suffering did not make her less. It carved her into someone more whole. And that is the quiet strength a good woman carries after being hurt, not just survival, but transformation. When a man betrays a good woman, one of the most significant yet overlooked consequences is the loss of trust. Not just her trust in him, but often her trust in others and even in herself. Trust, contrary to what many believe, is not an infinite or easily renewable resource. It is delicate, built slowly through consistency, truth, and mutual respect. When a good woman chooses to trust a man, she isn't simply reacting to charm or words. She's placing faith in his character, his actions, and his potential to care for something beyond himself. That offering is not given lightly, and once it's betrayed, it changes her relationship with trust itself. He may think that because she's kind, forgiving, or emotionally intelligent, the damage isn't permanent. But that's a dangerous assumption. A good woman's ability to forgive does not mean she forgets, and it does not mean she rebuilds trust in the same way again. What was once a natural extension of her love, her openness and belief in him, becomes guarded, filtered through caution and self-protection. He has, knowingly or not, made trust a more expensive thing for her to give, and the next man who enters her life will feel the weight of what the last man squandered. This scarcity of trust doesn't mean she becomes bitter or closed off, but it does mean she becomes more careful, more observant. She watches for patterns rather than promises. She listens not only to what is said, but what is done, and what is left undone. Her heart is still capable of love, but it now demands alignment with integrity. Where before she may have given the benefit of the doubt, now she waits for evidence. This shift isn't cruelty. It's wisdom earned through pain. She knows now what it costs to extend trust where it isn't respected. Meanwhile, the man who broke that trust may go on, unaware of the true weight of what he has done. He may think the relationship ended, that people move on, and that feelings fade. But in reality, he has altered her trajectory in a way that cannot be undone. Her growth will continue, but the trust he once had access to, pure, generous, and unquestioning, is no longer his to receive. He has made something rare even rarer, and though she may one day fully love again, it won't be with the same innocence. That part of her was a gift he didn't know he was holding. The tragedy is that many men only realize the value of that trust once it's far out of reach. They remember how freely it was once given and how difficult it is to find again. They may even meet women who are good and kind, but who hesitate in the way she never did, because now she is the woman who teaches others to protect what she once gave too easily. In breaking her trust, he did not just end a relationship. He created a shift in how she relates to love itself. And that change echoes long after he's gone. When a good woman is hurt, something within her shifts. At first, the pain is raw and overwhelming. She may feel as though the foundation of her world has been shaken, not just because of the betrayal, but because of the depth of her investment. She loved with openness, with sincerity, and often with a willingness to see the best in someone. That level of emotional exposure makes the wound deeper. She doesn't just mourn the man or the relationship. She mourns the version of herself that believed fully, that gave freely, that hoped without hesitation. Her heartbreak isn't simply about loss. It's about the realization that her openness left her vulnerable to harm. With time, that suffering begins to change her. She becomes more introspective, more cautious. Her mind replays not only what happened, but why it happened, what signs she missed, what boundaries she should have set, what parts of herself she ignored in order to keep the peace. Slowly, clarity takes root. She starts to see that her goodness was not the problem, but her unguarded openness was taken for granted. What emerges from that process is a woman who is still kind, still loving, but no longer willing to give those parts of herself without discernment. The innocence that once shaped her love is replaced by a measured, watchful strength. As she grows wiser, her energy shifts. People may still see her warmth, her empathy, her generosity, but it no longer flows without filter. She becomes selective about who receives her trust, and she no longer feels guilty for protecting her peace. Where she once gave people the benefit of the doubt, she now waits for consistency. Where she once forgave easily, she now expects accountability. Her love is no less powerful, but it is no longer unconditional in the way it used to be. It has conditions now: respect, honesty, mutual effort. She's not harder, but she is sharper, and those who meet her after the pain will encounter a woman with new, firmer standards. This change can confuse others, especially those who only knew her as endlessly giving. They may say she's different, that she's closed off or harder to reach, but what they're really sensing is her wisdom. She no longer places her worth in how much she gives to others. She knows now that love without boundaries is not love, it's self-abandonment. What she offers now is deeper, more intentional, and more aligned with her values. If someone wants access to her heart, they must now earn it, not expect it, and that shift protects her from repeating the same patterns that once caused her pain. In the end, the woman who becomes wiser but less open is not a diminished version of who she was. She is a refined one. Her journey through heartbreak has not broken her, it has awakened her. The softness remains, but it is now guarded by discernment. The love remains, but it is reserved for those who can meet her in equal measure. Her strength is quieter, more grounded, and more rooted in self-respect. She has not closed herself off from the world. She has simply learned how to be open without being exposed, how to care without being consumed, and how to love without losing herself. When a man wounds a good woman, whether through betrayal, neglect, or dishonesty, the consequences don't end with her pain. In the aftermath, he often believes he can move forward unaffected, perhaps even relieved to have escaped responsibility. But life has a way of returning what we put into it, often in forms we do not immediately recognize. When a man causes harm to someone who loved him purely and deeply, he invites a form of chaos into his own life, not as punishment from outside forces, but as a reflection of the internal disorder he has created within himself. That chaos may not be immediate, but it begins to grow quietly, steadily, and often invisibly at first. He may begin to attract relationships that feel exciting but lack substance. At first, these connections might seem like freedom. People who require less, ask fewer questions, or come with no emotional depth. But soon, a pattern emerges. The people he draws in may mirror the very dysfunction he once introduced into the life of the woman he hurt. He may encounter dishonesty, manipulation, coldness, or emotional detachment. Where he once was the source of emotional imbalance, he now becomes the recipient. The energy he once dismissed or took for granted comes back in unfamiliar and often uncomfortable forms, and he begins to feel the instability he once caused. This shift can be disorienting. He may wonder why things no longer feel right, why trust is harder to build, or why he keeps ending up in situations that drain him. What he fails to recognize is that when he betrayed something real and good, he taught himself that such things are disposable. And in doing so, he began to surround himself with things that reflect that belief. He starts living in shallow waters, unable to dive deep because he has damaged his ability to engage with vulnerability and authenticity. The very chaos he once dismissed becomes his environment, not because the world is cruel, but because he no longer carries the clarity that once connected him to what was meaningful. Over time, that chaos begins to affect his sense of self. He may try to silence it with distraction, with work, with new relationships, or by blaming others, but inside there is a growing sense of dissatisfaction, a restlessness that sleep can't fix and achievements can't fill. He starts to sense that he has lost something valuable, something irreplaceable, not necessarily the woman herself, but what she represented: stability, peace, emotional grounding. The contrast between what he once had and what he now experiences becomes starker. He begins to see that the emotional chaos around him is not random. It's a mirror. Eventually, the man is left with a choice. He can continue the cycle, pretending that nothing is wrong, blaming everyone but himself, and surrounding himself with superficiality that only deepens the emptiness. Or he can stop, reflect, and face what he has done. He can take responsibility for the harm he caused, not only to her but to himself. That accountability is difficult, even painful, but it is also redemptive. It is the only way to restore order to the internal chaos and begin to rebuild something meaningful. Without it, the chaos remains, not as a curse, but as a consequence. When a man hurts a good woman, he often doesn't realize what he's done until long after she has gone silent. In the moment, he may think he's simply made a choice, walked away, acted selfishly, or prioritized something else. But beneath that choice is a far more significant loss. Something irreplaceable has been broken. A good woman gives from a place of sincerity. She offers presence, patience, belief, and loyalty that doesn't come easily in the world. When he wounds her, it's not just the relationship that ends, it's the vanishing of a rare kind of connection, one rooted in emotional depth and unwavering care. What made her irreplaceable wasn't just how she made him feel, but how she saw him. She believed in his better self even when he couldn't see it. She supported him not out of obligation, but because she genuinely wanted him to grow. Her love wasn't shallow or transactional. It was deep, nurturing, and constant. When he betrayed that, whether through dishonesty, neglect, or disrespect, he didn't just reject a person. He rejected the sanctuary she created for him. And once a good woman withdraws that kind of emotional safety, it is not something that can be found easily again, no matter how many new faces enter his life. Over time, he begins to feel the absence in subtle, aching ways. He notices it when conversations with others feel surface, level, when support feels conditional, and when trust feels like a performance rather than a natural exchange. He might chase new experiences, new relationships, and temporary highs, but nothing settles him the way her presence once did. There is no replacing a woman who loved him with no ulterior motive, who saw beyond his flaws and still stayed. That kind of connection is built slowly and lost in a moment, and once gone, it leaves a space that no distraction can fill. Eventually, he realizes that what he lost wasn't just a partner, but a version of himself he was only able to access through her. With her, he may have felt more grounded, more hopeful, more inspired to be better. She was not perfect, but she was real, and that realness brought out something in him that no longer feels reachable. Without her, he may drift toward people who want pieces of him, not the whole, or into habits that numb rather than fulfill. And in his quietest moments, he knows the truth. He let go of something that wasn't meant to be temporary, something that many spend their lives searching for and never find. By the time this realization fully settles, she is no longer waiting. She has rebuilt herself, guarded by the lessons his actions taught her. She has become stronger, not colder, wiser, not bitter, and while he remembers the warmth of what they once shared, she now holds that warmth for someone else, or perhaps just for herself. What he lost wasn't just love. It was the chance to be truly seen and loved for who he was and who he could become. And that, once gone, is not something the world gives back. It is the kind of loss that lingers, not loud but lifelong. Her absence highlights his failings in ways he never expected. At first, it may feel like relief to him, freedom, escape, or even a sense of regained control. He tells himself he made the right choice, that he wasn't ready, or that she asked for too much. But in the silence that follows her departure, a slow and steady realization begins to take shape. Without her presence, reflecting back the parts of him he took for granted, he starts to feel exposed. Not to the world, but to himself. The very traits she accepted and encouraged him to develop now lie dormant. The growth she inspired in him begins to unravel, revealing how much of his strength was tied to her presence. He starts to notice the difference not just in his surroundings, but in who he is becoming. His choices may grow more impulsive, his relationships more superficial. He finds that without her voice grounding him in reason and care, he acts more out of ego than clarity. In contrast to her quiet stability, his life takes on a kind of disorder. Small at first, then increasingly difficult to ignore. The chaos isn't dramatic, but it's persistent. He misses the feeling of being understood without explanation, the comfort of having someone who believed in him even when he doubted himself. That loss, though invisible to others, becomes a loud echo in his day-to-day life. As time passes, he may try to fill the void with distractions, with people who ask less of him or challenge him less. But none of them reflect back the better man she once saw in him. He begins to see the pattern. The emotional distance he now feels in every new interaction is not because of them, but because of what he lost. Her absence is not just physical. It reshapes his emotional landscape. He doesn't laugh the same way. He doesn't rest the same way. Something essential is missing, and it's not her approval he longs for. It's the version of himself that only existed when he was with her. Eventually, he has to confront the reality that her absence isn't just a void. It is a mirror. It shows him the parts of himself he neglected, the ways he failed to show up, the growth he resisted. What once felt like escape now feels like regression. He sees how he dismissed what was real and chose what was easy, and in that clarity regret sets in, not just for losing her, but for not becoming the man she believed he could be. That belief, that rare and unwavering faith she had in him, is what he misses most. Because deep down, he knows that without her presence challenging him to rise, he allowed himself to sink. By the time this understanding fully settles in, she has changed, not out of spite, but through healing. Her life has moved on, shaped by the pain but not defined by it. She has grown in ways he cannot follow, not because she is better, but because she kept evolving while he stood still. And now, her absence is permanent, not because she wanted it that way, but because he gave her no reason to return. What he lost was not just her love, but the rare opportunity to become a better version of himself through that love. And that is the kind of failure that lingers long after the silence begins.